we're going to start the next part of the evening, which is a rally forum hosted by the incomparable Plum Tyndall, wherever he is. Here he is. As I said earlier on, a young man. Right. Okay, we're just going to play an intro now and a few videos.
Belinda was mine till the time that I found her, holding Jim and loving him. Then Sue came along, loved me strong, that's what I thought. Yeah, me and Sue, that died too. Don't know that I will, but until I can find me a girl who'll stay and play games behind me, I'll be what I am, solitary man, solitary man. I've had it to heal being where love's a small word, part-time thing, paper ring. I know it's been done having one girl who loves you, right or wrong, weak or strong. Don't know that I will, but until I can find me a girl who'll stay and play games behind me, I'll be what I am, solitary man, solitary man. Don't know that I will,
like that photograph, Pop. 400 conference on that.
a girl who stays, play games behind me, I'll be what I am, solitary man, solitary man, solitary man, solitary man.
Well, these evenings are very important because it gets us all together. Sometimes, sadly, these days, we only meet at funerals. But now, here we are with the beautiful cars outside and all our old friends. And that's what tonight's all about, to celebrate an amazing anniversary of 50 years when this man, Billy Coleman, won the British Championship. Absolutely amazing. I've been a very lucky man. I've sort of lived through a number of golden eras of rallying, and I've got to know a lot of the drivers, a lot of my heroes. I've become very friendly with them, despite of the odd thing I might have said about them at times. But ladies and gentlemen, let's just remember some of the superstars that either came from or came to this country. Paddy Hopkirk, Roger Clark, Rosemary Smith, Ronnie McCartney, Henry Toivonen, Pentti Ricola, Tony Pond, Mark Lovell, Russell Brooks, and Colin McRae. And then, of course, three very special people who very sadly paid the ultimate price for their sport. Our own sadly missed and dearly beloved Bertie Fisher, Frank Maher, and Craig Breen. So now, ladies and gentlemen, really without any further ado, it's time to call the main man up to the stage, Billy Coleman. We've got to get a microphone on you here, Billy. Just hold on a second. Thank you. There we are behind you. Have a seat, Billy. Have a seat. Solitary man, that video. Are you a solitary man?
It was until I met Carmel.
It's a solitary profession. Farming is a solitary profession, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I suppose I was always a bit of a loner, to be honest, and so no longer solitary, I don't think. Plum. No. So.
Right. Well.
By the way, sorry, there's one name there now, and that
yes,
is
indeed.
very sadly. And it was a big tragedy at the time because this poor lad was only in his second event ever, and that's Owen McCarthy's son. Owen McCarthy that died tragically in the Kerry Forest Rally about 3 years ago. So,
yes, indeed. Yeah. A young man who's only starting his rally. Well now we're going to have another...
But actually, I was talking to his father at the time, Liam, and he said, when you see the mileage, the fellas like us clocked up in that era, and here's this young lad, second outing. It's just so cruel,
Terrible. Yeah. So we're going to remind you a little bit now of the early years of rallying. We've got a little video, if we can press the button, and these are when it all started.
Thank you for the days, those endless days, those sacred days you gave me. I'm thinking of the days I won't forget a single day, believe me. I bless the light, I bless the light that lights on you, believe me. And though you're gone, you're with me every single day, believe me. Days I remember all my life, days when you can't see wrong from right. You took my life, but then I knew that very soon you'd leave me. But it's alright, now I'm not frightened of this world, believe me. I wish today could be tomorrow. The night is long, it just waits sorrow, let it wait. Thank you for the days, those endless days, those sacred days you gave me. I'm thinking of the days I won't forget a single day, believe me. Days I'll remember all my life, days when you can't see wrong from right. You took my life, but then I knew that very soon you'd leave me. But it's alright, now I'm not frightened of this world, believe me. Single day, believe me. I bless the light, I bless the light that shines on you, believe me. And though you're gone, you're with me every single day, believe me.
The long gone but never forgotten Kirsty MacColl.
I'd say I should dedicate that one to Carmel. Because
that's a favourite song of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's a great song, but in many ways she was the making of me, in actual fact. So. But there's a Cork connection, because I think that song was written by Ray Davies of the Kinks, and if I'm not mistaken, his wife was Patricia Crosby from Cork,
right?
Who of the newspaper family, whose brother Alan we kind of knew, so local connection.
Very good.
Good, sir.
Billy, let's go back a bit. What was it like in the Coleman family when you were growing up?
Well, things were good until I was about 4, and this upstart came along, a fella named John, and kind of stole my thunder a bit, But growing up, to be honest, we got on fairly well. But they say 4 years is a good gap with kids, I think probably was. So, sure, I had a wonderful childhood. Bill Street was a great place to grow up. It was a small country town, fairly quiet at the time. I used to be playing hurling and football and soccer out in the street, With my late brother-in-law, Harry Robinson, Carmen's brother, a gang like that. And Jesus, nowadays you could hardly cross the street with the traffic and all the keys that my nephew Patrick is after selling. I had the garage. You see, when I learned very little in school. I hated school. And as a result, I was sent to boarding school when I was 13, because it was a case of
And that was in Tipperary, wasn't it?
It was in Rockwell, yeah. And
that's where the Michael Carroll connection comes in. Yeah.
Then, sorry, John was sent there later, 4 years later. Then, but I throw the school back in the door and down to the garage, and there was so much exciting stuff going on, with cars, trucks, and tractors, and it was either that or out with my 2 uncles farming, you see, and so it was inevitable, I suppose, that it was going to become a petrol head at some level.
What was the motoring history of the Coleman family? I mean, obviously the farming and the motoring were the 2 big occupations. How did the garage start?
They had no silver spoon, I can tell you, because my grandfather, Bill Coleman, had a forge and 26 acres. Yeah. And he was, I think, the last of a line of 4 or 5 generations of blacksmiths. Like the McRaes in Scotland. I used to often talk to Jimmy about it. The McRaes were blacksmiths too. People think blacksmiths have special powers, but I don't know if that's true. But if they had, I didn't get any of them. And then when my father was born in 1911, he was the youngest of 5. They had 1 sister who was Ger Buckley's mother, Mary Coleman. And I suppose, if you like, the blacksmiths were the garagemen of the day, because the horse was the transport. So there was a kind of a natural evolution into the motor trade, and they came into Mill Street, bought little premises. And to give you an idea how hard times were that time, Plum, their father died when they were young, and my father's 2 older brothers, Ger and Jackie, could only go to school for the last 2 years, I think, every other day. The other 2 days were in the forge or in the farm. And didn't stop on building a nice business there in Mill Street, which my brother and gang are still carrying on. So, that was the background. And as I say, like growing up in that environment, you're going to have a natural interest in cars.
Did anybody do any competition before you?
No, well, I played football in the local football team, and we actually went to a county final. Christy Ring used to train us a few times. It was the great Christy Ring. Worked for Irish Shell that time, and he was often in our premises and talk about hurling all day with my father. You'd think he'd be sick of it, but he wasn't. Yeah. He was actually one of these people, like, who live for their sport, and I was the opposite. When I got into motorsport, great fun and everything, I loved doing it, but I was only kind of half in it. And I think of people like Ring there now, Roy Keane, Padraig Harrington, I heard on the radio there not so long ago, and he said, if I wasn't paid to play golf, I'd still play every day. That's amazing, if you're that single mind, and it's very hard to beat that. I could never get on that level, I kind of had enough of it after one event, and I'd see when the next one was on, it's a bad attitude, really.
So you went the farming route, and your brother John, he went the
John, yeah, I went farming then, and John took over the business, and I tried to do the rally driving at the same time. It was very difficult, but actually the next thing happened, after Rockwell, you see, because of the background I just told you there, my parents, to keep them all happy, I decided I'd go to college. So I went into UCC and a business degree, and it's an awful waste of money looking back, but so my parents' money as it happened, but so I stuck it out anyway, and I hope I got something out of that. But then, of course, I actually, when we were growing up in Mill Street, the young lads were soccer mad. And I played soccer in UCC with the junior team. We had a great trainer there, Jerry Lane he was Cork Hibs and played for Ireland a few times. And I used to meet Jerry. He worked for Air Rientu. I used to meet him, go out through the airport. He was a great old friend, He passed away a few years ago. But I loved UCC because, the freedom. I hadn't come out of a boarding school. I used to beat the hell out of us there, in Rockville. And as you were one of the pits or one at the top of the class, like with my equals, just beat the hell out of us. So to get out into the free world, and do you were your own boss, kind of, and it was a big change. I'll never forget it.
Well, your brother, of course, he was GAA mad and rugby mad and highly successful at both. So a very good time to welcome John Coleman to the stage, please. Just a bit. Hey, John.
Hello.
Hi.
All right.
Well, John, tell us, you were GAA and rugby mad, but highly successful at both.
I wouldn't say that. This was a fierce act to follow. And I said I was wasting my time going down that route. So we had very good players in Mill Street at the time, and things progressed, and we went from minor to under 21 to senior, and I enjoyed every minute of it. We used to also do the rallies with Billy at that time, not as much as we'd have liked, but because it was hard to stay fit and be out all night. So the two didn't work, so my father would say to me, "You stay at home now, it's more important to win Sunday." So I had much choice, because until my father said, we did, But I was looking there at the start of the film, Plum, TRU 250, it's an intriguing story like that, how that came about.
Yeah.
But he was interested.
But just let me introduce that a little bit, because, this is what made the whole thing famous, this car.
Yeah.
It's known and admired to this day.
Yeah.
But it was known as the Tatty Escort.
It was, yeah.
Now, that wasn't fair, really, was it? Because it actually came in a very good order.
My father used to get very insulted when people called it tatty, because it was tatty to look at, but it was brilliant inside, like,
I'll tell him what happened. No, actually, in fairness, in the garage, that car was rebuilt to perfection. And I went on I think it was the Coleman rally in Limerick, or Clare, and I was coming home, so an all-night rally, and I was about a mile from home, out there at Gran, and I'd say I fell asleep and spun. Luckily, I didn't hit anybody, and hit a wall and wiped the front off the car, and there was I don't know what, there was an event coming up the following weekend anyway, and we had no parts, and the car was just kind of thrown together with that fancy grill, and that's what happened.
Was it a bit of chicken wire or something?
It was, yeah. So that's how that came about. Sorry, John.
But your father was a very, very good engineer, wasn't he?
No, he had a great head, and never panicked. He got all his traits, my father's traits, because he was cool and calm and collected, and he had a mighty mind. But anyway, we were coming from a Munster final in Limerick, in the Gaelic grounds, a hurling final, and he had said to me, look out for a crash escort that we could do up and make some way competitive, and whatever. Look, the traffic in Patrickswell that time used to be back to back, and we were ages going through, and whatever look up I gave up on the terrace to my right, there was the back of a Mark 1 escort. They were only new on the market at that time, and I said, that's a crashed escort, So I could say nothing because my father knew nothing about it. So I had to come home first and report, and Billy was down the field with his cattle at the time, and I went down and I said, there's a crashed escort put on Patrickswell. Come on, we'll go down again. So off we went, and we were debating going down how was the best way to get it through to my father, like what we were doing, And we reckoned if we sold the men that was selling the crashed escort a new car to soften the blow. So that time, as you know, Henry Ford had a huge choice of colours. You could have anyone you wanted. Once it was black, And we had a blackhead stock. So we went down Tuesday with the new car and an ambulance that we used to call them long ago with 2 narrow wheels. You stick it up under the front member, and we brought home the old one.
So that wasn't...
£200 it cost,
Yeah.
you know?
That wasn't a bad deal, a new car sales and the basis of a rally car.
So, well, when he came home, and it was in a bad way, so we cut the front off it, and my father got more interested the more we were doing to it. And he got more keen, he wanted to do it his way. So he got stuck into it anyway, and Artie Keefe, God rest their, all those great lads we had in the workshop, that and that, and gone to their eternal rewards. But I'd like to say Mike Healy, who was brilliant at the time, is here today and here with us tonight and still with us in the workshop at home, and pleasure to have him here. But we cut the front off, and that time there was no gear for lining up the new stuff. So Artie and my father, their eye, welded back the chassis and put on the front. And that's how TIU came about. And it can't have been a good handling car, but he obviously got the hang of it quick because he was competing with the big boys and the worst cars.
Well, actually, before that, could I go back a small bit there? There's a man below there that has an awful lot to answer for. And I was, you see, in my first year in college, I got the Evening Echo, you know, and the local paper here, and there was a notice for a film shows up at Munster Motorcycle and Car Club. So I used to go up there. Usually I'd cycle there, but one evening anyway, I had a car, and there's fantastic films there of like Fangio, Nuvolari, and Moss, and all those fellas, and often they were racing on gravel roads. You know, it was brilliant watching. So I was on the way up to Vernon Mount, and I saw this fella walking along the side of the drive, and I stopped and gave him a spin, and it turned out to be Dan O'Sullivan anyway. And Jesus, I tell you, that man has some amount to answer for. So,
Well, Billy, I think it's time we met Dan O'Sullivan. Dan, up you come. Yeah.
You know, Plum, very interesting, but only for this man coming up on the stage, only for Dan, the British Championship would never have happened. Because he was definite in the latter part of 73 that we should have a right go at the British Championship. And to a man, we all felt we were out of.
Oh, Dan.
You all right, Dan?
You're very welcome.
You okay?
Yeah.
But Dan reckoned that he was perfectly capable of pulling off the British Championship.
And the problem with Dan was the sky is the limit.
Absolutely. And
he
said if he got a decent car, he'd rattle it. So we reckoned that he had a new car, and we bought it out of Boreham, the competitions department in Boreham, and I'm sure it was Steve Mills took it to Aberystwyth in Wales for the start of the Welsh. Was that right? MEV?
Yeah, I think so.
The memories are kind of poor now at this stage.
But anyway...
but actually, I'll tell you another thing now about Vernon Mount before I go too far.
We're skipping a little bit ahead here because we want to we want to get back to this meeting, Dan, when you hitched the lift up the driveway.
And sure, look, we've been mates ever since, but the thing was with Dan, I said, sure, wouldn't we do an all event, you know? And I said, Jesus, but what then? Like, and I said, I'm through car here, like, and it's an old second-hand Ford Anglia. So we entered, I'd say, the next navigation rally, and sure, off we went, and threw off the hubcaps, and we had a rally car, God help us. And then you see, on top of that, the Anglia had 4 drum brakes, and you couldn't guess how far we went when we had no brakes. And you literally, if you were driving hard, you'd have no brake in a couple of miles, almost no brake. Yeah. So you had to develop ways of slowing down or to judge your distance from the bend a bit more carefully and all that sort of thing. So we did a number of those. I don't know how we weren't killed, but so
we had no instruments in the car.
Not at all. Nothing.
We were trying to, you know, if it had tents.
It didn't have safety belts then.
If it had tents coming up, you know, that'd be a boom. Yeah. But there was no. You had to guess how much a half a mile was it or a mile.
I never found out what poor devil bought that car afterwards.
And of course, your parents had no clue you were doing this, because there's a story that your mother went into the local butcher's and he said, "Hello, Mrs. Coleman, I see your son won a rally."
Jesus, he wouldn't get away with much around Mill Street, that time, I tell you. Going back to Vernon Mount, because it's very close to my heart, this place. And then the atmosphere up there, this fellas be there until 3 or 4 in the morning in Vernon Mount.
On Vernon Mount, yeah.
And then all the children arriving in their Mini Coopers in the evening, and the air would be thick with castor oil, with the oil in the Mini Cooper engines. Demi Fitz and Tom Burke and all those lads, Geez, a lot of them, most of them gone now, sadly. But I remember then we were just young lads up from the college, and the older people there, we were so well received. I'll never forget it. And we were just young whippersnappers up from the country.
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean? And we were like one of the gang straight away, and that was just so nice.
And then the Cortina came, GT Cortina. That was next.
That was we had a Cortina, and we did the Circuit Vile, and that I'd say 67.
Oh yes, the Cortina, yeah.
We did, yeah. Went near the end, and we actually just barely got to the end.
But Dad, were you driving him on? Were you encouraging him to go to these more luxurious events?
I didn't have to. He used to drive at 11:10. He was able to hold the car on the road at 11/10.
I know.
Yeah.
And 10 is fantastic, but when you can still keep the car on the road at say 11/10, that's exceptional.
And John, were you involved at all? Were you on the service crews? And your father went to virtually everything, didn't he?
TIU 250 is close to my heart, Plum, because we got all the grief at home before he moved on to better things. But
we took the engine out of
we took the engine.
Wasn't it?
It was a twin cam engine in the Cortina, and we took it out. And my father insisted that the engine had to be done above in the kitchen at home, on the kitchen table. So he reckoned no one would interfere with you when you're at it. And my mother...
Actually, what happened was an engine we bought in England, and it was supposed to be a top engine, but it was just all put together wrong, and just was petty.
Yeah, my father...
man did actually put it right in the end. And
but my mother was a very placid and a very encouraging woman, and every night when we come up after the supper, she'd take her knitting and her crochet out to the front room and work away as happy as Larry, and leave us do whatever we wanted inside in the kitchen. But my father was a total perfectionist. When we were doing the tappets, if the feeler gauge, there was no good me putting in the feeler gauge, he had to do that himself. And if it wasn't 110% right, take it out and start again. And it was, believe it or not, while we were doing the engines ourselves, he never had an engine failure.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
I didn't drive it hard enough, that's right. Actually...
Well, Plum, it's funny, but... what's his name, the co-driver that...
Peter?
No, after Peter.
There's a lot of them.
He was driving he was racing in Autosport. He told me he did...
John Davenport?
No. Martin Holmes.
Martin Holmes.
And he did the Monty with him one time, and Martin rang me afterwards because Mr. 11 was the only way of ringing me. And if he thought he'd get Billy, like he was out of luck. Because even if he was at Mr. 11, he wouldn't talk to him anyway. So it was a case of taking all the calls, drive you out to Lackady and delivering the messages. But Martin said, I have very interesting news for you, John. You must tell Billy. And he said, I've done a survey on the top 50 to 100 rally drivers in the world at the time. And he said, would you believe it, your brother is the only one that has never been on his roof. So I went out and I delighted with myself to give the good news. And he said, sure, what does that say? I am not going quick enough. So you can win.
I came close enough a few times, I can tell you, but in fact, the famous cover, the front cover of Autosport, it was, I don't know if you've seen that, Plum, but she's at a fair angle, but I was with John Davenport that night, and there was black ice up in the Yorkshire, and we won the event afterwards. Actually, Davenport, you remember him well then.
Yeah.
Davenport was...
Let's get back to 69. the Circuit of Ireland. And we were all watching. We had there were the Boyds and the Stars and Cathal Curley, who's here tonight. They were the top men. And of course, the English came in it was a round of the British Championship. And all of a sudden, this car, number 115, ended up in third place. And at that time, Billy wasn't very well known, probably in the north of the country. And that was amazing. You must remember that very well, Dan.
Well, the driving was fantastic. And but at one stage, the gas came into the car when we were going down towards Killarney. And we had a plastic window at an angle on the passenger side. I was holding that so that we could breathe in the car. And all that driving was, just poetry in motion. It was so fast, and it was, he was able to keep it. He was keeping the momentum all the time, and saving the incidents that could have happened.
Well, actually, then, I kind of blew it big time then in the last night, because I don't know if you remember, the manifold broke. And Bill Barrett was the rally manager at Ford's that time, and he was taking a big interest in what was going on, and he was come down and talk to us all the time at the service and everything. And we were, I'd say, West Donegal there somewhere, and the final night in the dark, and he said the manifold had broken, and Bill Barnett said, you pull into our guys now and they'll sort you out, you see. So we pulled in at the Ford service, and the guys got out of the car and arsed around for a few minutes and got out the gas, and Jesus, no gas, come on. I was fuming. I really got cross, and went up, got back in the car, and there was my father and a couple of lads farther up, the gas lighting ready to go, but we had no time. But the other fellas had blown a bit of time we had, so we went into the stage in a ferocious temper. And Jesus, like we were minutes ahead of the next car. It was pure stupid. But I suppose when you're 20 years old or whatever it was, you're not thinking. And
of course
we slid off, actually, into a little drain. We got pushed out. So you would think that would have been a lesson. Yeah. But no, they had to do the same. And then we came over that notorious Brow and Glen stage, where the bog is in the right. And the road goes left, landed in there, and that was it. But it was so unnecessary.
Right. And of course, Dan, you probably very nearly didn't start at all. Now, I can't believe this, but somebody told me that Billy was late with his entry. That couldn't be true.
No. I was a stickler for doing things on time, you see. And it was, Jesus, I just didn't send in the entry in time on this rare occasion.
David Mitchell, clerk of the course, I think you had to do a bit of pleading there, did you?
What a gentleman. I drove all the way up to Belfast, and it was about 2 weeks before the rally, maybe. And he was with Gallagher Tobacco. He was working in one of those places anyway. And he said, you're lucky, he said, there's one man after pulling out. And there is a list, he said, but since you've come so far, we'll slot you in there. What was the number?
150.
That's it, yeah. So, and away we went. But
Plum, could I just tell you something now? The difference between rallying those days and nowadays. He was running on SP Sports that year when he was 115, and Dan was giving out about the number of cars he had to pass coming down from the north down as far as Blessington. And somebody had a word with the powers that be anyway, and they moved him up to the top 6, which made it much easier. There was no way he was catching the fellas in front end. So anyway, we got into Killarney, and we were debating, would the tyres do the Sunday run? They were already after doing from the north to Killarney. And we were...
And actually, do you know what, I'm coming into Killarney, I was driving like this because I'd broken the seat.
I saw that.
On a jump. Yeah. There was more welding to be done, sorry. Yeah.
But a set of tyres that time were a big investment, So he said, you had a chance until Sunday. So, he came into Killarney on the Sunday evening. He was in third place. And then you remember the tyres, they were absolutely spun. They were tubes on the way out. And so we had to head down for Dunlop's for a set of new tyres. And we went down anyway. I said, we have 4 tyres for that. And he said, what number? 115. And There was a great man there in Dunlop's at the time, John Horton.
Yes.
What a
John.
gentleman. What a gentleman.
man, yeah.
And John said,
Sadly, no longer with us.
sadly, he's no longer with us, yeah.
No.
But John was an utter gentleman in every respect. But I said, for SP Sports there, John, and he put him on anyway. And I said, what do we owe
Just
you
like
now?
4 ice creams, Plum, you know.
Billy never did the paying, like, so I had to find out how much they were, and he said to me, where are you lying? I said, third. There's 2 Dunlop stickers, he says, put them on the front of the car and your thumbs up. So,
But you know,
but anyway, just before I go from
yeah.
that, Plum, we left Park Friendly Monday morning, and the first stage out was Mary's home place in Scatterglen. How was the name of it again? I can't think. But anyway, he never arrived at the finish. My father and myself were in a chase car, and next thing he was about 10 cars late, and he said the car is absolutely undrivable. You see? So we had no time to do anything. So my father sat in anyway, and he said to me, "What changed in the car since yesterday?" And I said, "Sure, all we did was put on the 4 new tyres. Did you check the tyre pressure?" And I said, "Sure, you assume nothing in this game." So the biggest eye-opener I ever got. My father had this, we met him at the finish of the next stage, and he had this pencil in the top of his pocket, which happened to be a tyre gauge. And you stick it on the valve, and to shoot out 48-pound pressure. So that was cured, and he was back up to third again within.
It's, you know, Plum, what drivers have to put up with, you know.
Yeah.
But I tell you, to be fair, then, like the boys in Dunlop, like there was John Horton, and then there was Jeremy Ferguson and Fort Dunlop in Birmingham, and Jesus, they were fantastic support for us. And I think they saw us as kind of young Irish lads trying to make it over there, you know, and they were just brilliant. They couldn't do enough for us. And they've got great memories of that. I don't know if Jeremy is still around. Sadly, John died a few years ago. But Irish Shell were great supporters too that time. But getting back there to, you know, to that rally, at the end of that Circuit of Ireland, then so we didn't get to the finish. We went off the road about 4 or 5 hours from the end, and I got a letter the following week from Bill Barnett, rally manager at Ford's, and it was saying, you know, that he thought I had a lot of potential as a driver, and he said he was going to be coming to Ireland soon and could like to meet me. And I wrote back and I said, "Sorry, Mr. Barnett, but I've arranged to go to America for the summer, you see." And I'd finished in UCC, and I'd arranged to go to the States for about 3-month visa. And I said I'd contact him when I got back, you see, and it's very handy for me because I left straight after the exams, dodged the graduation and everything, just fierce handy. Geez, I ended up staying way into the next year, and of course when I came back, the whole scene had changed. Got on to Bill Barnett, and yeah, he said, you know, we'd see, like, and so, and then of course the political situation between Ireland and Britain was getting worse by the day, and so look, I kind of had to start from scratch again, and then we went on to the Alpine, wasn't it, the Renault. The Renault, yeah. We got a lot of support from the Smith Group, then they were the Renault importers. But yeah, we're going back now to the early 70s, isn't it? Yeah, 69, 70.
Well, down the next progression, really, excuse me, was the Renault A110. How did that all come about?
The
Alpine.
The Renault.
The Alpine.
The Alpine.
The Alpine.
Alpine.
Yeah.
That was Smiths in Dublin.
It was, yeah.
And all I remember at the moment is you know, having to go to where was it in France, northern France? Dieppe.
Down there,
yes.
yeah.
And
Got a great deal there actually, but the car was a bit underpowered, you know. I
yeah.
remember that then.
It was a very rare car.
It was a great experience. Like, it was a brilliant handling car, but it was the one they gave us actually was quite heavy. It had a big undershield, It saved Dan's life actually on one occasion over at the Tour of Dean. Do you remember that, Dan?
I do, yeah.
We slid sideways into a railway crossing, a level crossing. And gee, I tell you, with a heavy impact, and it saved you on Dan's side, of course.
They were very fragile.
Yeah, but the guard saved us anyway. So.
And of course, you won the precursor to the Donegal International Rally, the Rally of the Rosses in that car.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, had a couple of wins, and geez, we were very unlucky. Then the Circuit of Ireland was cancelled that year. I think it was '71. There was an oil tanker driver strike or something. There was no petrol to be got, and they were in a great rally. I'm not sure who ran that event, but it was called the Killarney Easter Rally.
Yeah.
And we were winning that from CB. And remember what happened the last days, put a Conrad out through the block.
The engine went, yeah.
Yes, anyway, that was a big disappointment at the time. So they went up to the Swedish rally, then after that, I think...
Well, how did that come about?
Well, I suppose I was always a bit of an adventurer, you know. Like going off to the States on my own, and nobody over there, I wouldn't have missed that for anything, even for the works drive. But you know, I remember winning the Cork Club, Munster Club ran a nice rally there early in the year. It was called the Moonraker. I don't know if it is there anymore, lads, is it? Or maybe it is, but it had become a special stage rally at that time, and we won that on a Saturday. It was all night rally, Saturday night, and I remember coming home then, putting the car up in a spanner check, 2 spare wheels into the back seat, and head off for. I was hoping to get the boat to go to Sweden from Dublin. It was too late for that. Off up to Larne from there, and then I was lined up nicely to get on the boat above in Larne, and there was this guy who was throwing his weight around, regulating where everybody went, and he said, "No, young man, you said you park over there, you see." And son of a bitch, what did he do? He put me at the end of the down queue. I'd say to this young whippersnapper now. I put manners in him with his French sports car. That's the only reason I could think anyway. Missed the boat. And then I finally got on the boat 2 or 3 hours later. Drive across southern Scotland, down the A1, over the A14, over to Felixstowe. Jeez, I was absolutely
This was in the rally car?
In the rally car.
Right.
And I just barely got on the boat to Gothenburg. And I had arranged with actually, he was Bjorn Waldegard's co-driver on and off at the time. He was a top man. I don't know how I got in touch with him, Fergus Sager, and said, "Look, we've no service or anything." But he said, "That's fine." I said, "And he's a friend to bring the 2 spare wheels." So we headed off on the Swedish rally with Fergus co-driving.
Let me get this again. You headed off in the Swedish rally, in the rally car, with 1 spare tire or something?
2. No, 2.
2. I apologise. Sorry for that.
We got studs then. There was these huge long studs, and Fergus had arranged that, and they did the entire event. You still have it at home. I drove home down through Denmark and across the Harris this time, and back to Rosslare. But Jesus, what a trip! And but we had a great run, you know. And there's a bit of written about there was a race in the middle of they'd have 3 or 4 cars together around a pony. Oval track, they use it for chariot racing or something. And I think the best time that was ever put up by a foreigner there, but it was pure, the car was clapped, like absolutely clapped, but when you got up ahead of steam, you know, it was just no brakes. You come up to the end of this, power off, and just drift around in a nice kind of a controlled slide, as neat as you could, off down there. Jesus, I was hoping to go on forever. I was as high when I come up with that. But anyway, that was Sweden, and Jesus,
what an adventure! What amazing!
That was probably about 400 miles of stages in that event. Nowadays, it would be a quarter of that, probably. Thought of that, you know.
Well, I think it's time to move on a little bit, because I want to thank Dan and I want to thank John. We're going to see Dan later on in the evening. And I want to bring up our next guest. But just before you go, if you 2 brothers ever run out of work or get into any trouble, you'd make a great double act. You know, you could fill the stadium.
Well done, Dan. Yeah.
Thanks. See you later.